All right, so this is my conversation with Jason Riddle. Jason is a U.S. military veteran who spent approximately 20 years in the U.S. Air Force. Our conversation revolved around a variety of topics, with a heavy emphasis on his deployments post 9/11 and pre 9/11 as well. Before we transition to the full conversation, I want the audience to be fully aware that some of the things we discussed and some of the terminology that we used might be a little bit explicit, so please keep that in mind. In addition, we mentioned a couple of things that might sound unfamiliar, so I figured I'd highlight them here before we start. First thing is the A-10, which is an aircraft that Jason worked on for most of his career. We also touch on the GWAT, which is essentially the global war on terror that ensued after 9/11. And finally, we mention the Delta Force, which is a special operations unit of the U.S. military, Tier 1 Special Operations Unit. And with that in mind, please enjoy this conversation with Jason Riddle, and if you get a chance, perhaps you can revisit some of the earlier conversations I've had on the show. Thank you. So, I am joined today by Jason Riddle in the East Wing, and it is certainly an honor to have Jason on the show with me. Jason, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, so a lot to cover, a lot to talk about today.
Yes.
And, I mean, we've already started our conversation prior to recording.
Absolutely.
We've talked a lot. We've had a lot of different conversations, but I'm sure there's so much more to cover and highlight. But just to kind of give my audience a little bit of context, I wanted to ask you about. I want to first explore a little bit about your background, and
Sure.
You're an Air Force veteran.
Mm-hmm.
You've had an extensive experience with U.S. military, and I'm sure this is our conversation will revolve. Will include a lot of some of the operations that you're a part of and some of your service abroad.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how about you tell me and the audience about perhaps or highlight to us the early days of your, take us back to the early days when you decided to join the Air Force and why you made that decision.
So,
Oh my God.
like most big decisions I made in my life is because of something happened, right? So I joined what's called the Delayed Enlistment Program, or the DEP, in 1998. So, and I told you before, I enlisted in 99.
Right.
So here I was, I did the Delayed Enlistment Program like as long as I could because I had this weird attachment to not leave. Which later on I felt like that was pretty stupid that I stayed there as long as I did.
Right.
Because I'm from Sacramento, California, and I don't know what it is about Sacramento where we have like this like fear of leaving the island. The great unknown is out there,
Right.
and it's really not that bad once you leave California. And so I had this thing this desire to stay home longer after I said that I was going to join. The big catalyst that why I wanted to join was I was working full time.
Okay.
At a company where I didn't feel like I had a future. I was the youngest technician, so I worked at a car dealership, a Dodge dealership.
Okay.
Which has since gone out of business, so it's not like it's still around. I was the youngest technician. There was a lot of ageism that happened there, so I was like kind of like shit on because I was the youngest guy. So I got called junior and sport.
I hate that.
Squirt. The kid. I got called the kid a lot. Give that job to the kid. It'll be good for him. Like stuff like that happened a lot. And so I kind of got tired of it. And I'd fought for a raise to get $7 an hour.
Ooh, way back in the day, that was
big time to get $7 an hour back in the day. And I was going to school full time.
Good Lord.
So I was in the Consumnes River Community College system in Sacramento, and I didn't know it then, but I had like zero desire to go to school. Like I was like, I just did it because high school was over. You're supposed to go to college of some sort, right? No idea really what I wanted to do with my life.
Yeah.
I used to think I wanted to be an automotive engineer. That was kind of in play for a little bit there. And that obviously that ship sank a long time ago. And so I ended up joining because like all this shit in my life was just garbage. I felt like I was going nowhere. And then in that winter of 1998, my father had been convicted of a crime.
Oh.
So my father was a career criminal. I lived with my dad through high school. He was a drug smuggler and gun runner, an associate with a organized crime element.
Good Lord.
And he had gone down for murdering his third wife. A crime he's still serving for. Even though he's like in hospice now, we don't talk. We are not connected like in any way, shape, or form. When I cut off my dad, I cut him off all the way. Yeah. And I felt the need to just not be there anymore. That was the big drive. I don't want to be here anymore. And I didn't feel like my future was good there. And so I went to a strip mall that's near where my grandma used to live that had all of the services in it. And I talked to everybody that day. Yeah. When I went, except for the Navy. I knew I didn't want to join the Navy very early on. And so, yes, I am going to shit on the Navy as often as I can. So
you can do it because you were in the military. I don't know.
If you're in the Navy ROTC unit, do not take it personally. And if you feel conflicted about what I have to say, then just do better in your career.
Oh my God. Man.
But I knew for sure I didn't want to join the Navy. So I spoke to the Army, the Marine Corps, and the Air Force. The Air Force dead last. And I spoke to the Army before I talked to him. And the thing that education was still important to me. And so the Air Force has a college built into it. It's the only service that does.
Right. Air Force Academy?
The community college of the Air Force.
Ooh.
So all the training that we get is vetted and validated by the college that is built into the Air Force.
Yeah.
Granted, for 22 years of service, I got like 12 credits. So I didn't get a lot.
Just 12 credits. Okay.
But, it helped a little bit when I was at Wake Tech. And we'll catch up to Wake Tech here in a minute. But so that's how that kind of happened. So why I landed on the Air Force was that. They were the only ones that had that. And like my recruiter like used me like to the day I left for basic training. He was like, I thought I lost Jason. There's no way he was going to come back. There's no way.
Wow.
And then when he called me, like I turned like 7 shades of white. I had no idea he was going to come back. He's like, I thought I lost you. You were not going to be my recruit.
Well, what did he do that led him to think that way?
So, because I just talked to the Army and they're like ready to sell you the planet. Like if you've ever sat in front of an Army recruiter, like I met their station commander that day. I met the captain. I met because I was in Marine ROTC in high school, so like they wanted me, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you would be a great asset to the United States Army." And I took the they have a pre-ASVAB you can take in their office.
Wait, what's that?
So the ASVAB is the was Armed Services Vocational Battery Test.
Okay.
Right. So that's the test that you take where they figure out what job you're qualified for. And I had like blown that out of the water in their office. And they're like, dude, we want you bad. And so, and they were throwing like contracts at me and numbers and dollars and bonuses and timelines were being thrown at me. And I was like, well, let me come back. Cause I knew for sure I was just going to talk to these people. So I worked at a dealership. You're not going to sell me a car on the first day. Like know your audience a little bit here, right? You are not going to get me today. Yeah. We were just here to talk. And so I made my way down the row, and the last guy I spoke to was the Air Force recruiter. And I don't even remember his name. Like I knew his first name was Joe. He was a cop in the military in the Air Force.
Is that your average Joe right there?
He was my average Joe, right? And so he was like, I thought like because you kept like comparing to next door being the Army, right? And he was like, there's no way I thought you were going to come back. And so I came in and I enlisted in open electronics. So I even kind of rolled the dice on what career field I was going to land on, and didn't know until I graduated basic training where I was going to land. So I was kind of like not sure what was going to happen. And a lot of recruits now, like you probably even talk to some kids here when they're getting ready to graduate and they're getting ready to commission. They know what career field they're going into. Like their contract is written in the past tense, but mine was not. I was like very kind of liquid so I made it all the way through basic training without really a job.
Right.
And then I got 4 to choose from, and I picked one, and I ended up getting one of the 4 that I chose. So I picked, it was like, I want to say it was like electronic warfare was one, which I'm so glad. I after I found out what that job was, after I had been in aircraft maintenance for a while, I was like so glad I didn't get that job. The other one was aircraft guidance and control, communications and navigation, and I forgot what the 4th one was. But I knew I didn't want to work on radios, even though I ended up being a radio guy later on.
Oh gosh, ooh, that's another thing that we got.
Yeah, we can touch on that later.
Yeah.
And then I ended up as an aircraft guidance and control, which is autopilot systems, instrumentation, weapons delivery, and then later on it became electronic countermeasures, sensors, and it became like a generalized avionics career field within my time in aircraft maintenance.
What did you know before you entered into the military about the military? What sort of exposure did you have? Were there any stories that you were exposed to, like, Vietnam?
Oh, absolutely. So my father was in Vietnam. He was a draftee.
Okay.
My stepfather was in Vietnam. He was Naval Special Warfare before it was really cool. So he remembers like not having enough money and people to do things correctly. And I'm sure a lot of his PTSD is related to baked in misusage of special operations in the 60s.
Oh.
My grandfather was in the Air Force. He's the only other airman in the family. My uncle, like my grandmother's brother, he was in the Army in World War II. Yeah. My other grandpa was in the Army in World War II, or in the Navy in World War II.
Wow.
So yeah, him and his 3 brothers joined the Navy, but their dad was in the Army, and they all served in World War II at the same time, which was crazy.
Lord.
Yeah, their dad being at the end of his career and them starting their career.
That's insane.
So yeah, the military does run deep in the family. Granted, in my immediate family, it may stop with me because neither really one of my kids are interested, except for my youngest thinks he's going to join the Navy. But
after shitting on the Navy right now, I don't know.
I have told him, and those who, again, speaking to the kids in the ROTC program here at NC State, you guys will be proud of me when I said this. So I told him, I was like, yes, you can join the Navy. And granted, like, he's an adult. I really don't have much influence in the situation, okay? But I will not allow you to enlist in the Navy. And he's like, why? And I was like, I will not permit a Navy chief to exist in my family, period. And he's like, what? What's so bad about Navy chiefs? And I was like, wait till you get to the fleet. You'll learn all about it.
Oh, my God. That's another thing we're going to have to unpack after. Oh, goodness.
And so, and also he wants to be a marine biologist. The Navy's the only real source for that. For a scientist at that level, the Navy's the only one that has a home for him.
Yeah. So we're talking about joining in 1989.
1999.
1999.
Yes. So okay. I guaranteed that I was going to enlist in 98. I enlisted in 1999.
That's like 2 years before 9/11. And maybe 5 years after the Kenya, the embassy bombing.
I think the embassy bombings were in 97, 98.
Oh my!
They were the summer before I joined.
So at the time, I mean, the atmosphere was pretty heated,
right?
The climate
It wasn't cold.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Did that factor into the decision that you?
Not at all. No. Yeah. I was like, I wanted to get the hell out of Sacramento more than anything.
Right.
I knew that I wanted to just end that phase of my life. And I knew if I didn't rip the Band-Aid off, it was going to be where I was going to be forever.
Gosh.
You know,
Yeah.
I probably would have worked at that dealership to the minute they closed it.
Good Lord.
You know,
So 99 at the time you had, 2 years after you got 9/11.
mm-hmm.
So that must have like shifted
everything. Right.
Right. But prior to that, what was your, what were the highlights of your experience? Like 2 years before something like,
So
yeah.
we, so fast forward through the training pipeline, I go to basic training.
Mm-hmm.
I just flew under the radar in basic training. I'll openly admit that. There's a lot of people who are like, well, I volunteered for everything, which I did volunteer for everything. I did learn that before I left. An old GI told me before I left, he's like, volunteer for everything in the training pipeline.
Okay.
And I did do that. And I will say that to those that are considering military service here as well. Do volunteer for everything.
Okay.
Because you're going to end up in like something awesome. And it'll force you to step outside your comfort zone. And in that, you may end up in something really awesome. And there is more than one thing that I volunteered for that got me out of stuff I didn't want to do when I was in the training pipeline. So,
Okay.
and because I volunteered for something else, I got a less shitty job, if you will.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of do nothing time in the military, right? The hurry up and wait is true, right? So not always is the training schedule perfect.
Yeah.
And not always are the additional components that the training pipeline needs ready to go when they need them to be. So like if you're going to go to the field, those who work out in the field may not be ready for you to show up. So like things got to shift and tweak a little bit. And then you end up with like some white space in the schedule. And then they basically like use the trainees as like a labor pool, right? So you get farmed out to whoever needs help with something.
Right.
One of the jobs I got farmed out to was to work at the chapel for a day.
The chapel.
The chapel. And all they did was shove us full of snacks, teach us how to call home.
Okay.
Through the government system.
Yeah.
Because you can use the defense switch network to call any base. And if that base had, this is to date myself back when we all didn't have phones in our pocket, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and long distance calling was a thing.
Right.
If you called the base nearest you that shared the same area code as your parents, which I had 2 bases near me that shared the same area code as my parents, I could call them and you can just ask for an off base line and they would dial the number for you. So I got to push out 2 extra phone calls at home, which to me at that time was a big deal. And it was pretty awesome.
Wow.
All because I had volunteered. And a lot of times when something like this happens, they go, I need 2 volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
They don't tell you what the hell you're getting into. So I volunteered with this other kid that I knew who seemed okay, right? Because I didn't want to go with somebody I didn't like. And so this other kid seemed okay. And I was like, yeah, I'll go with him. And we go over there and we basically just like fuck off all day. It was beautiful.
And where were you stationed at the time?
This is in Texas in basic training still. I hadn't even graduated basic training yet. And I was like, this is awesome.
Good Lord.
And so, but yeah, and so that's why I say like do volunteer for everything. It'll definitely help you out in your career.
And when you refer to basic training, for clarification's sake, what does it consist of typically? Like, are we talking about like 10 push-ups, 2 setups, or whatever?
There's a lot of that,
okay.
right? There's a lot of the physical training piece. There's a lot of schools of thought about what basic training should be and shouldn't be. Yeah. Most of the basic training experiences or boot camps, it's an indoctrination into the system, right? You get all your medical stuff squared away. They begin your big medical chart that follows you for the rest of your career. You get any shots you're missing, you get in basic training. And I have a story about that in a minute.
Okay.
You get, all the medical stuff. You get uniforms issued to you. You get that first haircut. They cut everybody's hair off if you're a guy. Mm-hmm. The ladies, they cut their hair really short. Yeah. And then there's a lot of isms that still kind of exist from the World War II era, right? So they teach you how to march. They teach you how to stand in a formation. in Air Force basic training, there's a lot of focus on Air Force history. So we got a lot of books about Air Force history that were shoved in our face. And like when we had any downtime, we were expected to be studying.
Expected is the key word.
Expected is the key word. And then there's some hazing.
Okay.
Like every military organization has some sort of hazing that's adopted and accepted. Ours was we had to simulate working in a chemical environment. Granted, it's not as cool as it sounds. So our instructors came in and they basically destroyed the barracks. Like they flipped every bed over, they pulled every drawer out, they threw all the stuff out. Like they did it in front of us too. They made us stand there and watch them destroy the room. And then they're like, okay, now go put it all back together. And so we go back to put it all back together. We didn't put it all back together fast enough. And then they're like, okay, now we're simulating chemical exposure. So the MOP levels, right? The mission oriented protected posture.
Okay.
So we had to put like our long like cold weather pants on and our M65 field jacket. We had to put that on. And then we had to go do it again. So we put on more clothes in the winter in Texas. And like no windows open and the heat was on, right? So we were getting smoked pretty quick, right? Lord. So then the second time we didn't put everything back together the right way or fast enough. Then put the gloves on, and the gloves in basic training are horrible and they don't fit anybody's hand right. I had like another like inch and a half of extra material past my fingers. God. So like I'm like like a bad T-Rex trying to slap things together. Oh, God. And then after that was to put the winter hat on. And back in the day, the winter hat had like a fleece lining on the inside that would go down over your ears, and we had to put that thing over our ears. So we're just these sweaty messes trying to put the room together. We never passed. The point was not that we were going to pass. The point was that they could control our lives. And that you have to do what we say, and this is why, right? And so. Was it important? No. Could it be removed from training completely? Of course. You know what I mean? But it was just like one of those things, right? Yeah. Like I think every GI has some sort of like weird event that happens at some point in their career that's kind of hazy. The Navy more so than anyone else. I'll just say that openly.
Right.
Go watch a Chiefs induction event and see exactly what hazing looks like in its all of its glory. But yeah, it is what it is, right? It was 1999. We weren't at war, so priorities amongst the services were not the same. You know. Just attitudes were different. And after 9/11, yes, they changed overnight. And everybody was like set to full throttle for the next, until I retired was like, another 18 years.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
So you two things here to pick up on. One is that story of the shots. You say you had a story to share about the shots. They had
the
to
shots.
Yeah, so, but we can talk about that.
Let's hit it real quick. It's quick.
Yeah, let's do it.
So the shots is hilarious. So when you put that many people together in the middle of winter, so like I went in January.
Okay.
I graduated late February. Because back then, Air Force basic training was only 6 weeks. That's another reason why I joined the Air Force, because their training was shorter.
You hit the jackpot.
That part was shorter. But I went to my technical school, which was like almost 11 months. So I was like, I got it. I lucked out in one area and got screwed in another. So the shots are, so we all got sick, like stupid sick. Influenza like runs through our barracks and our two flights, right?
Okay.
Is that the Army has platoons and companies, yada yada. The Air Force has flights. And so we had a brother flight. Some people have a sister flight. We had a brother flight. So both groups of us get sick as shit. Graduation is like days away.
Yeah.
And so they're like, well, because everybody's getting sick, you're all getting a penicillin shot. And they told us like at lunch one day. So immediately after lunch, we go get this penicillin shot. And I will never forget one of the instructors yelling at the medical technicians who were giving us the shots. They're like, hit them all in the same fucking cheek. I don't want the ass limp to be off at graduation. So we all got hit in our left cheek.
So you guys limp in one direction?
So we all look the same when we graduated, when we marched to graduation.
Oh my God. That's a legendary story right there.
And of course, we're all joking about our coordinated ass limp that we had through graduation. I think my mom sent me the tape recently. I don't have anything I can play a VHS on anymore because I am that old. I did my basic training was filmed on a VHS. And I'm pretty sure the one time I did watch it, you can kind of see the limp as we're making it past. Because we were flight 174 and flight 173. And fucking our brother flight goes before us, and you can kind of see them limp past, and then you can see us limp past, and then there's all the people who weren't sick after us.
Oh my God. I gotta see that video.
I'll have to find it. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a VHS around here somewhere.
Yeah.
Somewhere around here, someone is resourceful enough to find one.
We might find one in the station here too.
And so
good.
That was the coordinated ass limp. We joked about that like to the minute we left from left basic training.
That's insane. Well, so that would have been, you said, February of 99.
Yeah.
And then you go into technical school and you spend 11 months.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
when did you start that?
So, no, it wasn't 11 because I graduated in October of 99.
Okay.
Because I was at my first assignment in October. So maybe it wasn't, maybe it was 8 months-ish. I know it was long as shit. And it's in Mississippi through the summer. This is also 22 years ago, and everything feels longer in Mississippi in the summer. That was my introduction to southern humidity. I had never been exposed to southern humidity before, and I was like, oh, this is horrible. And because Biloxi's right off the coast, and that base is actually like on a little peninsula, so it's got water on both sides. Ugh. So it gets swampy quick.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Spending 8 months there, that must be
and
hell.
it was rough. Yeah. I had my first heat injury there where I actually got like dehydrated enough to pass out. I had that happen there. And I didn't know that could happen to me.
Until it happened.
Which is why I'm like so psychotic about water.
Right.
And that's why I'm like constantly ensuring I'm hydrating because I didn't know that I have that in me that I can pass out from dehydration.
Yeah, but you were in I'm sure I'm jumping ahead, but Qatar, and you said Bahrain.
Bahrain, yes. Yeah. But see, I don't know, man. Like I feel like when you live there, like it just happens faster, and you feel a lot more climatized quicker, I would say, in the Middle East than I'd had in the States.
Interesting.
But I mean, granted, this is the furthest I had been away from California my entire life. Right. I had been to Mexico like 3 times before that, and that was it. Yeah. So that was and I had been to Hawaii, and I'd been to Southern California a whole bunch. And if you're from Northern California and you go to Southern California, it is almost like a different country. Wow. God. And driving there, it feels like you're going to a different country, especially when you're a little kid. Yeah. And so. Yeah, like this is the furthest I had been from home. And, I had no idea what survival in this place looks like or feels like, and so, yeah, of course I fucked up enough to pass out, of course I didn't understand what hydration looks like in the South. Right. All I remember was that as fast as I could get water in me, it came out.
From all pores,
pores,
oh my God.
A uniform lasts like a day, the whole thing's got to go.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So let me try to paint a clear picture. We've got October of 1999 graduation, and then you've got 2 years after that in September you get 9/11. It just shifts, I'm sure, everything.
Yeah, everything gets crazy after 9/11.
Yeah, but you said you did have an assignment before 9/11.
I did.
Yeah.
So my first real world assignment, right? My first after the training world, they call it you entering into the operational Air Force. They call that. was at what used to be Pope Air Force Base, which is now absorbed into what was later absorbed into Fort Bragg, and then now renamed Fort Liberty.
Right.
Forgive me if I say Fort Bragg over and over again, but
you're used to it.
I'm used to it,
Yeah.
and to be honest, outside of the news, if you say Fort Liberty, a lot of people still don't know what you're talking about. And I saw they talked about something on the news today about Fort Liberty, and it felt foreign to my ear, and not because I have any attachment to who Braxton Bragg was, or I care about renaming bases after Confederate generals or Confederate officers. I'm so glad that we don't have bases named after losers anymore.
Right.
But I was frustrated with the naming that they went through when they renamed Bragg. So long story short, they did put out a big poll to all the soldiers that were there and airmen, and they all got to vote on what they thought the name of the base should be. Because it's the only base that renamed that didn't name the base after a hero that comes from there.
Oh, that's right.
It's the only one that renamed. And they had picked somebody. I had heard they picked Charlie Beckwith. And those out there in the world can look up who Charlie Beckwith is. He's a founder of one of the founders of Delta Force. I'd heard that they had picked that. Granted, I was in Nevada when this went down, so I didn't hear exactly how it all played out.
Right.
And then the results of the pool and the election make it to the garrison commander, who's not the end all be all of command structures at Fort Bragg, says, no, I like Liberty instead. So when I hear that name, I still kind of hear a punch in the face to the soldiers who live there.
Yeah.
And I still kind of hear like a shitting on of the heroes from there.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I know people from there who have done so many heroic things. And I heard the argument was that we have too many. and that's a crazy problem to have in the first place. But at the same time, it's like, you could have picked one.
Exactly.
You could have.
Yeah.
You could have picked an era. You could have picked, or you could have picked even the modern era, because a lot of complaints of other global war on terror veterans is that there's really no celebrations of our heroes from our war. And I think that it would have been a good move to pick someone from the global war on terror era. Like Tech Sergeant Chapman, who is a Medal of Honor winner or awardee, is was at the 24th STS at Pope, aka Fort Bragg.
Yeah.
That would have been a perfect name to name the base after. The two Delta snipers from is it Stuttgart or Schubert and Stuttgart or whatever their names were, I forgot. Who were from the Somali incident.
Oh.
The Black Hawk Down guys.
Yeah.
One of them would have been a perfect name.
Right.
Colonel Beckwith, an outstanding name. Also, Fort Beckwith sounds like a name of a base.
Yeah.
Right? So there was a lot of things they could have done differently. So, and like, don't get me wrong, Braxton Bragg was a son of a bitch, and I'm so glad that there's not even a traffic cone named after him.
Yep.
But, they could have done better in that.
Yeah. But a lot of people from the outside wouldn't even see it the same way that people from the inside do.
Which is a lot. I mean, that might as well be the title of my career, right? Like, you guys just didn't see what we saw.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I have a different attitude about the Iraqi invasion than a lot of people do.
Yeah, which is something I hope that we can get into, because we had a brief convo about that before. But at the same time,
well, that kind of comes up to my first deployment, which is pre 9/11.
Oh, so it has some ties to that.
Yes.
Were you okay? Let's unpack that.
So let's slide up to that first deployment.
Yeah.
So I was at Pope for not quite a year when I had my first deployment, or maybe I'd rolled over a year. I just put on E4, which was early. I made E4 early.
And E4,
which was senior airman, so I got promoted early.
Wow.
Yeah, I was. For the first 4 or first 5 ranks, I was a fast burner.
Okay.
But when it became, there's a generation between E5 and E6 though.
Wow.
Yeah. I was an E5 for a really long time.
Okay.
So I which is senior airman to staff sergeant, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was a staff sergeant for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get over. So my pre 9/11 deployment is to Al Jaber, Kuwait,
Okay.
right outside of Kuwait City.
Okay.
This is in 2000 into 2001, so it was across the holidays.
Yeah.
So December, January, February, and I think we came home the front end of March.
Mm.
So now I know that I'm using these timelines out there, and people are like, well, that's like 3 months. So this is before the war started.
Yeah.
And big DOD did not see value in spending a lot of money on deployments. Even though most of our deployment needs were paid for by the Kuwaitis, they still didn't really put a lot of time into deployments.
The Kuwaitis.
So
the
Kuwaitis did pay. Yes.
Wow.
We were like mercenaries, kind of,
Mm.
paid for by the Kuwaitis through our alliance with the Kuwaitis, right?
I didn't know that was such a thing that you could do,
Yeah.
right? Because you're still a property of the U.S. government at the time. You're not like a
Right.
free agent, right?
No.
Yeah, that's just
Well, the mission was to patrol the southern no-fly zone over Iraq.
Mm.
So that's a U.S. initiative,
Okay.
right? But the Kuwaitis were really stoked to have us there to ensure that nothing from the north came down again,
Exactly.
right? So we're at a Kuwaiti air base. We were there, being hosted by the Kuwaitis.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, yes, it was a U.S. mission with U.S. interests,
Right.
right?
Okay.
Although those interests also align with the Kuwaitis.
It's still the same.
Right. So, and again, like we had mentioned before we came on mic, like a lot of those Arabian nations, their go-to when it comes to defense is just throw money at the problem.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what Kuwait did. They threw money at the problem. They're like, well, America, we really like your A-10 airplanes. They're really good at making sure Saddam's tanks don't come down here.
Mm.
So if you guys want to be here at this particular place at this particular time, we'll be happy to feed you and house you.
Yeah.
So
Did you get the 5-star treatment?
No.
Okay.
Not that trip. The next trip, yes.
Okay.
Not double odd to 01, but 01 to 02 after the war had started.
Mm.
Oh yeah, they rolled it out.
Okay.
So So the thought process was that this is going to be a permanent operation, a permanent base, right? So the first set of brick buildings were starting to get installed when I was there across 2000, 2001.
Okay.
So there was a lot of sense of permanency getting ready to happen, or permanent things getting ready to happen there. And so, like, we didn't live in tents. We lived in like a trailer dorm that it was like a big, long, skinny building that had a bathroom in the middle and like a lounge in the middle that had we call it a day room.
Okay.
And the computer was there.
Mm.
So again, to date where we are, one computer for 130 GIs.
Wow.
That had really shitty internet.
In Kuwait.
In Kuwait.
Wow.
At work. So each shop, not each person, had a computer.
Wow. Okay.
So the crew chiefs had a computer. The weapons guys had a computer. The supply guys had a computer. Specialists had a computer. So that's it.
Yeah.
Like the whole shop shared it. And there's some shenanigans ensued because this is back in the day of username and password. Everybody shares one terminal.
Ah.
So a lot of times computers stayed logged into unintentionally.
And we know what happens when you guys
emails,
got to see.
Emails get sent to people you may not be ready to receive them.
Nice.
So,
yeah. Perks of having a shared portal.
Perks of having a shared portal. Like a few people got emails sent out in their account that they weren't happy about.
Yeah, unsolicited.
Unsolicited, yeah. Again, like, it wasn't things were not as egregiously devious then. Like, I want to say that, like, not that fun was more wholehearted, but like, I don't think we just had the same level of deviousness that exists within Gen Z. You know what I mean? Like, we just weren't at the same tier.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We weren't like, ready to destroy each other's lives, but we definitely thought we had a dark sense of humor, and things were definitely like, a little sketch. Like one of the guys I worked with, he left his account open, and somebody emailed his sister from his email account about how he's like, and again, this is the aughts, right? So when people talk about homosexuality, it was a little different, right? And he's like, I'm surrounded by all these dudes all the time. It's all I can think about.
Oh my.
I don't know what's wrong with me. Am I normal? Am I okay? And he was like a big Bible thumper Christian too. So it was even more kind of funny.
I see what that's.
So she plays along though. She emails Mac and she's like, yeah, in that all like same sex environment, I can kind of see how that happened.
Wow, she fell for it.
she realized that he had done this, and so that's what happened. But there was a few times where sad emails were sent.
Yeah,
but
you want to adjust a wire?
No, I ran over it, so I got to pick it up. I got it.
It's all good.
But yeah, it's so damn funny.
Those are interesting times.
Back to the mission though. There, so we show up with 12 A-10s. That was the standard package for that deployment cycle. And as I told you before, I was in the 74th Fighter Squadron. We had a sister fighter squadron called the 75th. When you take a deployment package over there, so they had 22 airplanes, we had 22 airplanes. You try to take the best of all 22 airplanes over to the desert, right?
Right.
Granted, our definition in the 74th of what a good airplane was and the definition of what a good airplane was in the 75th didn't really jive up all the time. And most of the broken jets that I worked on while I was there were all 75th jets. So, and I joke that like every unit in the Air Force or every unit in the military has their 75th, right?
Yeah.
They have another unit that is with them. It's like a partner or a sister unit, and they just don't work at the same tier that's expected of you. You know what I mean? And everybody has a 75th, like there's always somebody out there who's just like, oh God, and they make it look like they have things so easy, and they don't always have it all easy.
All right.
But it just from the outside, there's always that kind of like, you have to be better than the 75th. You have to work harder than the 75th. There's all that kind of shit that kind of goes with it. But yeah, that was the mission there. So we had the 12 airplanes. We flew combat search and rescue alert.
Okay.
So we had, I want to say 3 jets on CSAR alert at all times. And we had the rest of the package was there for any direct action missions that were to come up. While we were there, GW gets inaugurated. So this would be in January of 2001.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Days after the inauguration, we went and bombed Iraq.
Days after the inauguration?
Days.
Whoa.
So we were the first big unit to go do a direct kinetic mission against the Iraqi military since the Gulf War.
Wow.
And I'm sure that's posturing. I'm sure that was a message to the Iraqis. And also probably a change in posturing for the U.S. as well, right?
Oh.
So up to that point, they had been moving into the southern no-fly zone, anti-aircraft systems, which they weren't supposed to do. They were hiding anti-aircraft assets in buildings and all sorts of different areas. So they were shooting at us every day. And they had been shooting at us every day since the Gulf War ended.
Yeah.
And the attitude was, don't go get them unless you get hit.
So nothing preemptive.
Nothing preemptive.
Okay.
Other than the aircraft are there.
Okay.
Right? And I like to think that we were smart enough to have like routes and paths that made it difficult for them to try to track where we were and what we were up to and when we were doing it, right? So nothing really looked routine from their perspective. But all those targets that had been shooting at us for all those years went and got talked to right after George W. Bush was inaugurated.
Oh. So all of them were bombed.
I don't want to say all,
Yeah.
but enough to where a message was sent.
Nice.
Yeah. So
Did
that was
make
awesome.
it to the news?
No.
Well, so you're telling me something that wasn't even made public in a way back then.
Or that anybody cared to make public.
Right.
Right? So it wasn't, again, nobody gave two shits really about the military until 9/11.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, yes, we're kind of always in a state of some sort of conflict in one way or another, whether it be high intensity, low intensity.
Mm-hmm.
And the American public is just like, yeah, that's how it is, right?
Right.
But the fact that happened, and pre 9/11, that was just kind of the attitude, like there were cruise missiles fired at Osama bin Laden in 98 or 7.
Is that in Sudan?
I think so. One of the times where they barely missed him. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Like there were times like where we had close calls where we could have got bin Laden before 9/11.
I've had a guy on the show.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Rick Prado was in Sudan, and they had eyes on him.
Right. So there was a few times where it could have happened.
Right.
And he had not really done anything except for the embassy bombings.
Yep.
And the coal.
Yeah. I was going to mention that.
But not necessarily anything in the homeland per se.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? But he definitely communicated that he wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And he was still pissed at us because in the first Gulf War, Saudi Arabia called us and not him and his mujahideen.
Ah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what he wanted to have happen.
Right.
So he had trained these guys in Afghanistan. They built a decent paramilitary force that we helped equip and train.
Mm-hmm.
More so equipped than train. Right. Go watch Charlie Wilson's War if you haven't seen it.
I got to watch that.
So he felt that force should have been the one that came to keep Saddam from coming into Saudi Arabia.
Mm.
But I mean, let's just be honest. It was not what we would recognize as a for real modern military force. And I don't think the Saudis had enough faith to keep them safe. And they leaned on us.
Right.
I don't necessarily support the decision. I'm not the biggest fan of Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
I've been there, so I can say it with my own eyes that I've seen things I was not a big fan of.
Ooh.
But it's and I've also seen them in Manama when they go crazy in Bahrain.
Yeah.
And so
across the border,
Allah cannot see over the water, so it's game on as soon as you cross that bridge.
Oh, man.
And I've seen Saudis do wild stuff in Bahrain. So granted, I don't hold their entire nation responsible for this, but I've seen people do things that I'm not really okay with. I wouldn't associate with these people or hang out with these people.
Yeah.
So
you had a few days after his inauguration, fucking bombing.
Go get him.
Yeah.
Right. So, but we had like another month and a half there, and nothing else came down the pipe.
Really?
So it was still a normal patrol and no-fly zone, sissy SAR alert. Fast forward to after 9/11, right? So pretty much throughout all of 01 and the front end, pretty much all of 01, we had a lot of training going on. We went to Vegas a bunch of times to drop bombs.
Can you disclose where those bombs are being dropped, or is that something that remains classified?
No, it's at the Nellis test and with the NTTR, so the Nellis test and training range.
Okay.
Right. So that whole range compound where that classified location is also at, it's all kind of encompassed in this big space, right? So everybody in the world, like, because we had like German F4s there to come play with us. We've had my first trip to Vegas, British Tornadoes were there.
Really?
Everybody in the world comes to Nellis to play air games in that space.
Oh, okay.
Because you can go live.
Really?
Yeah, you can't. Granted, you can't fire missiles at other airplanes, but you can drop bombs and shoot your guns as much as you want.
And I think even nuclear testings were.
There was nuclear testing there before. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's actually in Vegas. There's a bar called the Atomic Cafe. The roof. You could go up there and watch them do nuclear testing, and they would sit there and drink and watch the nuclear testing happen. They have pictures inside it.
Have you been?
Yeah, we've been there. My wife and I went there. Yeah, it was really cool. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So you have 9/11 happens. That changes the course of history.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a shifting sort of. That triggers the war on terror. Perhaps we should probably call it the G war on terror, global war on terror, GWOT. And that, I'm sure, even when that happened, were you here in the U.S. or were you? So you were like,
"Yep,
I got to go back and get after those people."
Yeah. So we were at Pope. We were right in the middle of an exercise, so we were training to deploy.
Yeah.
And we had actually broke our first record since I had been in the unit. So we were the first. It was the first time a unit of our size had generated that amount of aircraft that fast in order to be prepared to go to war.
Wow.
So across the entire A-10 community, we were the first to shatter that record.
Wow.
Granted, now I am a lucky dude who got to serve with some pretty amazing people, particularly at that time of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's just the right mixture of all of us who were there together at the same time.
Okay.
And because I don't know what their records look like these days. I don't know what happens in that world right now. I've been away from, A-10 maintenance since 2009 or 2005. So It's been a while since I have any idea what that maintenance complex looks like.
Gotcha.
Or what that operational tempo looks like. Yeah. So I don't want to speak to how good or how not good they are now. But at that time, it had been the first time we had done something that fast and that large. I had a friend of mine who was at Barksdale, where GW landed on 9/11 in Louisiana. And I had on actionable intel, high confidence, that their B-52 fleet was as ready to go can be. And B-52s are long-range strategic nuclear bombers. And you can make the 2 and 2 make 4 for yourself on that one. But I thought it was also interesting that our commander-in-chief felt the need to wrap himself in a highly lethal blanket on the day. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that was kind of interesting. But yeah, 9/11 to me, it was just a regular day. We were working 6 to 6.
6 to 6, 12-hour shifts, everybody.
I got home at a little bit after 6 in the morning, and I remember I just got to sleep, like good sleep, like drooling sleep.
That's some good sleep.
And my hardline phone rang. Again, we're dating the situation, right?
Yeah.
I had a hardline, 2.4 gigahertz cordless phone.
Okay.
That was right next to my bed, right?
Nice.
And I answered my phone, and it was my mom. And my mom goes, "Hey, we're under attack. Someone just crashed an airplane into the World Trade Center." And I was like, "What are you talking about? That happens all the time." Now, the reason why I said that happens all the time,
okay,
like the week before, I was a big History Channel nerd back then, and I just watched a documentary about the World Trade Center. And the World Trade Center was clipped regularly by helicopters and small airplanes a lot. So when I said that happens all the time, that's what I thought, right? She's like, somebody crashed an airplane in the World Trade Center. I was like, well, it gets bumped and nicked all the time by things that fly around it. It's only a matter of time before somebody just nosedives right into somebody's office.
Yep.
So when she's like, "No, I'm serious. Like, there a full-on jetliner crashed into the World Trade Center," you have to like go turn on the TV, and I hit the button on the TV, it cuts on, WRL, NBC, right, and I watched the second aircraft crash into the tower.
Holy
live,
shit!
Right there. So this is at like 8 something in the morning. I tell my mom, I gotta go, and I hang up the phone. I call the office, and what I get from my leadership of the office is just, hang on, we're gonna do a recall. So back then, readiness was a big deal, right? So, I'll mention how ridiculous readiness is later, but we always were kind of like show off how ready for war we were.
Yeah.
We could get everybody here, get everybody packed, get everybody ready to go.
Always on fifth gear, man.
Ready to get there, right?
Yeah.
That was readiness.
Yeah.
And so you would do what was called a recall, and they run down every chain of every section, and it starts at the top, and that phone tree gets initiated. Everybody gets a phone call, and based on the instructions from the recall, you have so much time to get to work, right? And that recall was informational only. And our first sergeant did it, which was the first time that he did it ever. And we had pro words on the back of the recall roster.
Okay.
All he said was like recall option, and I forgot what option it was. I think he said Charlie, right? So it would have been option C on the back of the recall roster. Right. And we never did that before. So I was like, shit, what the fuck is option C? I go and I look on the back of the thing, and it was just like accountability / informational, right? And so later on, I get a call. I was on night shift, so and the exercise was still going on as far as I know. And so I got like no sleep, and I call in like at midday, like, what's the plan? And they're like, we'll come in at your normal schedule time, and we'll figure out from there. So between midday and when we came in, at some point the FAA had grounded all flights for the entire country.
Right.
So we didn't fly. We didn't do anything. So a flying unit that can't fly, what is there to do? Right? Everything had been generated, so everything that needed to be fixed is fixed.
Wow.
So, what else is there to do at this point? So we pretty much got sent home that night with instructions that everyone was going to come in on day shift. And day shift was going to start like around 8-ish.
Not
right?
6.
So no, so the exercise had ended.
Okay.
But we found out on 9/12 like how good we had been. Right? We had no idea that we had shattered those records for the A-10 community. So we get in on 9/12. We did a FOD walk. So a FOD walk is where you walk the parking ramp where the airplanes are.
Okay.
And you clean up any foreign object damage FOD. So if there's any like loose shit on the ground, you have to pick it up and clean it up, right? I had a restricted area badge, which it's called your line badge, right?
Okay.
I had it tucked in my shirt because I was used to working at night, so I was a bit of a rebel, right? I wore my reflective belt during the day to kind of, even though I didn't have to, but like to show off, like, listen, I am not of you. I work at night. I'm a swing shifter, and we all wore it kind of like loose and like to the side, so it looked like a gun belt, right? So we looked like gunfighters from the old west,
gunslinging.
And so like I had my gunslinger freaking reflective belt on, and like out of nowhere we're in our little line walking down the fucking flight line, and a red Blazer rolls up, or no, a red Bronco, the OJ car, right?
Okay.
Like a truck I had not seen on the ramp before. Rolls up, and it's full of cops. And
really?
And this cop rolls up on me, and he's like, where the fuck is your line badge? And I like pull it out of my shirt and flop it out on my chest. And he's like, fucking not today, bro. Fucking not today.
What did he mean?
I don't even know.
What? Okay.
I'm like, obviously I have to be here. Like you obviously don't know maintainers very well if you think I'm trying to break in to fucking do this.
Oh my God.
And I remember I had made sure I left my line badge out that day. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But yeah, so 9/11 happens. We keep hearing that we weren't going to get a piece of 9/11, of the life after 9/11. We were on deck to go back to Al Jaber in that winter
Kuwait.
again, back to Kuwait.
Yeah.
And we knew we were going to go back to Kuwait, but all these things were starting to happen in Afghanistan. You know, the horse soldiers and all these things are starting to happen in that October, November, December timeframe, right?
Yeah.
We leave to go there in February of 2, right?
To Afghanistan.
To
Kuwait.
To Kuwait.
Ooh.
This is the beginning of where all jobs start in Kuwait, okay? Because both Afghanistan and Iraq started in Kuwait for us. We get over to Kuwait, and we're running the same missions that we had been running. The patrol and no-fly zone, combat search and rescue, ready for whatever is going to happen in the no-fly zone. Yeah. And also there was a lot of concern that with the destabilization that Saddam was going to get froggy. Because he would threaten, and his rhetoric would get a lot more aggressive in this time frame, right? And so there was a lot of worry that Saddam was going to do something. And he didn't, but the tasking order comes down for what later became Operation Anaconda. And that's our first fray as the A-10 community into OEF, into Operation Enduring Freedom. So we go to another place, and we ran the missions for Operation Anaconda out of there.
Okay. Another place you cannot disclose, it seems.
I don't think I want to.
Okay, don't worry about
it. Because of all the shit I already told you.
Yeah.
Just
we'll keep it under wraps.
We'll just keep it under wraps. So we're in this other place. We're running this operation, right? And it's like 72 hours straight, right? The jets come back. They get gas, ammo. Sometimes the pilot comes out, and then they just go right back. And if you follow the Battle of Roberts Ridge, you know how important it was to have close air support on station the entire time.
Yeah.
Right. And it was a big mess. Operation Anaconda was a big fight.
Oof.
It was probably the first big fight, if I remember correctly, of the RGWAT, right? So we then leave the other place and come back to Kuwait, right? From our perspective, it's over, right? Our piece of the GWAT has ended.
Yeah.
Then out of nowhere, pack your shit, you're going to Afghanistan.
Whoa.
And everyone's like, okay. So we pack our shit.
Yeah.
We go to Bagram, which was very much used to be Russian base then. Like, people talk about, like deployments to Bagram now or before the Taliban took back over again in 2020 or 2021, it was like a regular military base, like you see in the CONUS. Like it was the same kind of thing by that point. It was like a Ramstein of the Middle East, if you will, right? Very well established, lots of big airplanes, lots of big infrastructure. Yeah, they carried weapons kind of as a whatever. Right. And there was lots of talk, like there was definitely a shift in the GWAT where talk of being outside the wire became a thing. And
what does that mean?
Like being outside the perimeter, out in the world doing things. And when I tell people what like Afghanistan was like when I got there was no wire to be on the other side of. It's all bad guy territory. We just happen to be here.
Holy shit.
Right. And we received sniper fire regularly, particularly when they figured out what A-10s were.
Oh, yeah.
They'd never seen anything that big, that lethal.
I've never seen it until you showed me a picture of an A-10. I mean, it's a big plane.
Yeah, and
there.
it sends a message.
It really does.
It
that
really
weapon
does.
sticking out, that's
the big gun in the nose sends a
Yeah.
big message.
Yeah.
We're not Care Bears. We're here to fight.
Right.
Right? And it's the last gunfighting aircraft in the entire DoD.
Ugh.
Right? Where it has a gun that's meant to destroy anything that's in front of it.
Right.
Right.
It's a scary fucking gun.
It's a scary fucking gun.
Yeah.
Right? And it's even like when you know the science of it, it's even more scary because like it doesn't make a sound when it fires because the rounds are supersonic.
Holy shit.
So first round from a gun burst from an A-10 is on target before you hear it.
Did you fly that shit?
I mean, it's a one-seater, obviously no.
Okay,
but you know, the fact that our country has that in its arsenal,
dude,
is like nobody has that.
Wait, nobody has that.
Nobody has that, not in that form. No.
Wow.
The likelihood of you actually hearing the aircraft engines is higher than it is of you actually hearing the gun fire before you've been hit.
Good Lord.
Yeah. So yeah, and you can see it if you look up some videos online.
Yeah.
You'll see the smoke come out of the front of the airplane, and then you hear the burp. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, so yeah, they had never seen anything like that. You know, the Taliban guys and the Al Qaeda guys that are in Afghanistan, they're very, you know, the worst thing they had seen was probably like a Russian Hind, you know, probably MiG-21s, like noisy things that don't have a lot of lethality. You bring hogs into the mix, it sends a different message. Right. And so they definitely did not like us being there.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Not one bit, I would imagine.
And we had artillery pieces in the grass between the runway and the parking apron where we parked our jets, and they would regularly respond to any small arms fire in the bowl because Bagram's like down in a little bowl, right? And they would respond to any fucking small arms fire with artillery fire.
Wow. So
you would hear bop, bop, bop in the middle of the night, and then you'd hear kaboom, 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 that response, right? So it was such a crazy time. Our commander, who later became our unit commander, like he was the detachment commander of this event, he's like, welcome to the scariest place on earth.
Holy shit.
There was unexploded ordnance everywhere. We found out we drove over a high explosive 23 millimeter round that was like in the road. We drove over it for like 2 weeks straight. We had a bad rainstorm out of nowhere because they always say after it rains, all the explosives show up, like they rise to the surface or they get washed off. In this case, it was this live 23 millimeter round that we had been driving over for a week.
When did you notice it?
Well, it was buried. It was buried just enough.
Oh. And
sure enough, the guys who came and took care of it, they're like, yeah, if you'd have hit the tip, it'd have blown up.
Holy shit. You guys avoided that in like a...
Yep. The first day we're there, so the tail of an A-10 kind of looks like an H, right? We were hanging the tails over the concrete. So you'd have the tricycle wheel, right?
Yeah.
The back end of the aircraft would be over the grass.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Sure enough, like out of nowhere, these two EOD guys show up like on our second day of running operations. And they're like, hey, what time are you guys launching? And I'm like, who the fuck are you? I'm not going to fucking tell you shit. And they're like, because there's a grenade over there that we have to blow up as soon as you guys take off. And we're like, oh, okay. Fucking cool. Like, we're leaving in like 15 minutes. Fucking, we launch all the jets out as scheduled, right? And they come over there and they blow up this freaking grenade.
Holy shit.
And they had a mine flailer, which is like a bulldozer that has an armored bulldozer that has like a chain on like a wheel in the front. And it's meant to disrupt mines in a mine field and to set them off.
Yeah.
Right. Or to bring them to the surface so they can be dealt with by disposal technicians.
Oh, my.
Well, the mine flailer would hit shit all the time. And so you'd see it out there. Boom.
How many mines were in that fucking place?
I don't even know if they got them all.
Oh.
Like, I don't know if they got them all by the time the Taliban came back.
Was this like when, the Soviets retreated? They planted all that shit?
They did all sorts of shit.
Whoa. Okay.
And the
okay.
Afghanis, like the Afghani government,
Yeah.
couldn't figure out how to get an Air Force to work.
Huh.
They had MiG-22 or MiG-21s, but they were all fucked up. They're fucked up long before we got there. I have pieces of one of the MiG-21s in my house.
Really?
Yeah.
I gotta see those things.
We took a trip out to the MiGs and got to freaking like go play around on the MiGs. I believe still at the unit in the bar, because most fighter squadrons have a bar. There, one of the tails is in the bar.
Okay.
So we had a guy go cut the tail off, and we took it home with us.
Wow.
But in that area where the MiGs were, there were underground, like hardened shelters. And when we got there, there's like shotgun shells all over the ground. And like, I don't know who it was, but whoever cleared that area, like obviously had a fight with shotguns. Right. So they were close enough to where shotguns were employed.
Wow.
To clear out whoever was there.
Wow.
Because they said that when they did go clear Bagram, which I would love to like talk to somebody or know somebody who was there before we got there, because like there were so many mysteries that were like so strange, right? In the compound that became the Air Force compound, there was like this big pit in the middle of it that had like, I think it had an oven in it.
An oven.
Like just trash. Like,
really?
But like the biggest thing that I could recognize was this fucking oven that somebody had thrown in there. And I don't know if they were like in the process of like building a burn pit or what they were doing.
Yeah.
But it was obviously a place where they were dumping trash. Well, fucking dudes from the base, like medical people, start seeing like bones.
Bones?
And it was determined that they were human bones. So there were like human remains in there somewhere.
Such a mysterious place.
It was kind of like being like in a different planet a little bit.
Yeah. Because
it was so abandoned. And it had that very abandoned feel.
Right.
And it was so like there was a building like across the way that had a fire. And I don't know if that fire was like when they were clearing the base or when, but like it's like this burned out fucking building across the way from where we built our tents. And like there was just so many like mysterious things, right? And it was really cool to be there at that time. Right. To open it, what later became like such a massive installation.
Yeah. And at the time you were, you had also, I think we mentioned even before we started recording, you had everybody. You got Delta Force, you got the CIA agents.
Delta Force, CIA dudes, press, lots of cool guys with beards.
Lots of cool guys with beards.
There's a story that, so there were these two guys, they were in uniform with no markings. That's kind of
we know who
somebody's a spook, right?
Yeah.
And when Hamid Karzai came to visit Bagram, which we were there for this, right? And there were pictures of Karzai looking at one of our airplanes. And they like cut off the base. So I was on the wrong side and I got stuck on the other side of the base because I'd gone to the base exchange with a buddy of mine.
Okay.
So me and this dude were waiting for them to lift the gates so we can walk back to where we lived, which was right next to where our airplanes were. These two dudes are hanging out next to us and they're like kind of talking, and we get to talking to them, and we're like, oh, well, where's your home base? And that's a normal question that people ask when they're deployed.
Right.
And we did deploy with our unit patches on, which was a rarity for the time. And they're like, oh, we operate off the East Coast.
What does that mean?
And I'm like, roger that.
Yeah.
And my buddy's like, wait, what does that mean? I was like, shut the fuck up. Stop asking questions.
That's the Delta.
These dudes are cooler than us. And what was funny is that as soon as I said all that, like they like keyed up that we were okay to talk to, but they can only talk to us so much, and they started laughing. And the guy goes, I recognize your patches and I know your airplanes.
Oh wow!
And so I was like, okay, so he's probably a Delta kid from Bragg. Like, let's just be honest, you know. But
What
yeah,
was
they
their
were
build like. Were they pretty?
they were
well built?
jacked as shit.
Holy shit!
They looked like human T-bones. Like,
Bro, we're glad they're on our side.
yeah.
Oh
like
my
they
God.
never skipped leg day, like they were large people,
Man.
and I was like, holy shit.
Were they also one of those bearded folks?
The one guy had a beard, the other guy did not. Or no, neither one had a beard. I think that's why we thought they were approachable.
Oh, yeah.
Because the dudes with beards, they looked like Afghanis.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I saw one in the chow hall one day. So our chow hall did not have benches to sit down at.
Okay.
And this is also kind of like that soft type dining place or dining facility or expeditious dining facility, and these tall, high top tables that everybody stood up and ate at.
Okay.
You didn't sit down and eat at the chow hall.
Mm.
And it was a very expeditious place. It looked like you could hitch horses out front. Like it did not look like a place where like the overhang was just like this like slapped together corrugated roof or overhang thing. Yeah. And out of nowhere, I'm like eating, and then I like in my peripheral, I see a dude that looks like he's in like Afghani gear, and like kind of like twitched a little bit, and it is a ginger American who has like a very bright red beard.
Wow.
And like he is in Afghani gear, and he has an AK.
That dude is fucking.
And I'm like, okay,
wow,
this is where we are.
Wow.
We're doing the thing in the place with the people.
God.
And we were the first big unit to deploy to Afghanistan as well.
Wow.
So we were the first like regular forces kind of there.
So when these guys operate, I'm sure they receive codes of like what to say, what not to say,
yes.
who to talk to, who
Absolutely.
not to talk to, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but they are also sometimes indistinguishable. Like you see this guy walking around, he said they might look like Afghan type of guy. I mean, that might be one of the purposes of some of their missions, right?
Absolutely.
To blend in.
Particularly in that time frame.
Yeah, and to dye your beard, because I know that some of those tribal chiefs,
yes,
like they dyed their beard, especially the Korangal. We're talking
right.
about the Korangal.
They love
Valley.
to have the bright red
Oh
beard,
yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
And also we had guards that were from the Northern Alliance.
Really?
Yeah, so we had Afghani guards that were like our security forces guys.
You trust those guys?
I mean, who else are you gonna trust, right? Like,
Right.
You get there and so and so says this guy's cool. Yeah. That's kind of how it was back then. You know what I mean?
Because even in Benghazi, when they had the whole thing with like the annex, you had these security guys.
What is it? 12 September dudes that were supposed to come help them, and they didn't.
Yeah, February 17th or something.
Something like that. It was a date.
Yeah,
that they used as their nomenclature.
And they also had the guards that were not. You had these guards for a while, but then they decided to turn your back on you when the shit hits the fan.
Right. Now we had. Now I don't know if they were Afghani or they weren't.
Okay.
That were like laborers that were on base, right? And back then we called them TCNs or third country nationals. Now they call them OCNs or other country nationals, right? And I understand the third world connotation there is kind of shitty, but I didn't make the name up. I just was told that's what they were called.
Okay.
And they would assign, like that was a roving detail. Right, to watch these dudes, and they would assign like a random person to like watch these people to perform what they called force protection duty, right?
Okay.
And in true Air Force form, we can fuck up a cup of air. They gave this lady who was, I think, an air traffic controller, a rifle, who probably had only fired in basic training, and because again, it was a different time, like. The concept of what ready is, what ready to fight looks like, had not really been as defined as we know it these days.
Okay.
And she gets assigned to watch these guys that were there to burn the shit.
Okay.
Right. So that was one of their jobs. They're running the shit burning operation, and she's there guarding them to make sure they stay on task or don't go where they're not supposed to go. Right. Not the smartest move to put a small person, regardless of gender.
Yeah.
Right. I wouldn't put a little dude there either.
Right.
Right. To watch over these, and there are these large people from who knows where. right? Because some were Afghani, some were like from Northern Africa, some were from regular like deep Africa.
Seriously?
Yeah, there were people there that were laborers from all over the world.
Wow.
Yeah, and like the construction companies that had come in to try to help build the place, they had brought their people too, and so there was this mixture of workers who were on the base, even though that's a loosely used term.
Yeah.
That were kind of from everywhere, right? And so this this is right after I left too. Her job was to watch them. Well, they jumped her.
Shit.
And took her rifle. And they were getting ready to do something. But back then, so this is right in front of the old air control tower that's still, I think it's still at Bagram.
Okay.
All the missions got launched from right there. So like all those Delta kids and Special Forces kids and 10th Mountain dudes, they would kit up and get ready to go from there.
Wow.
Right? So one of these missions is getting ready to jump off when this happens. So the SF kids go over and they square these people away and disarm them, and however they did that, right? I heard they beat the shit out of them. And that's how that situation was solved. Yeah. Back then, and this is like, this is in like well into 2002. This is probably summer of 2002 when this went down. And yeah, it was just a crazy time to be there and a crazy place.
Good Lord. I mean,
and honestly though, for us, it was quiet because after Roberts Ridge and after Afghanistan, we didn't really have a lot of shit jump off. Like we would go and fly, and I think the Al Qaeda kids and the Taliban guys figured out what A-10 sounded like, and they would probably run and hide, and that happened a lot.
Yeah. Was there, when you were there, before I even ask this question, I wanted to ask, how long was your deployment to Afghanistan?
So my trip to Afghanistan was really short.
Okay.
So back to Big Blue, Big Air Force was still pretty cheap when it came to deployments. Even after the war had started and we kind of had like more money we could count. They didn't want us there for too long because the mission in Kuwait was still valuable. Right. So we get augmented by a reserve unit from Kansas City and New Orleans. Back then, New Orleans had an A-10 unit. There was a reserve unit. Right. And Kansas City had one too. Okay. I think KC's still there. I'm not sure. So a mixture of aircraft come from New Orleans and from KC. Their job is to come relieve us in Bagram. Yeah. Even though it didn't really happen that way. It still became, like, for the rest of that year, for the rest of 2002, it was like this mixture of active duty and reservists and active duty and reserve aircraft at Bagram. Okay. So we get back to Bagram, or back to Kuwait after this, and we're working with all these dudes who have like generations of A-10 experience. Wow. It was so we go from this like foreign planet of Afghanistan, right? Yeah. To like this major military culture shock.
And I'm sure none of you guys had experience working with those guys before.
No, and they looked at us like we were children.
Good Lord.
And sometimes treated us like we were children. But it was also kind of like awesome because when their jets would break, like they knew like right away what to do. Like no problem. There was no, it could be this, it could be that. It was, oh, it's probably that part I put in like 6 months ago. It was probably bad. Wow. Because they knew their aircraft to that level. Oh, yeah. Right? They also didn't strap their pilots in, which was an interesting cultural change for our pilots.
Interesting.
So we strapped our pilots in. Yeah. So the pilot gets in the seat and he kind of like hits these two little buckles that are right here by the tops of his shoulders. Right. Yep. So he sits there until the crew chief comes and puts those first two buckles in. And then the pilots usually put the bottom two in themselves. Their crew chiefs didn't do any of that. So, and by like, when I say they were much older than us too, like they were like way senior in rank. Right. So take everybody in my unit and promote them by 2. And that's like who works out there. Right. Good so Lord. You have like E7s and E6s out there, like very senior people out there doing jobs that we do with E4s and E5s.
Wow.
Okay. And there's usually one E7 who's in charge of all of us while we're out there working. And in their case, there was like one E8 that was in charge of all of them while they were working.
You even got E8s.
But they brought 2.
Wow.
We brought 1. And while we were there, they promoted another one.
Good
So they
Lord.
had 3 E8s in their unit. So
Man.
like when it came to like saying yes and no, like they were like, no.
So you were working with the big dogs at the time.
Right. And it was crazy. So, like our pilots would fly their jets and like one of their crew chiefs would be crewing the jet and like he'd be up there freaking holding things open. And like they're on microphone, so they could talk to each other.
Uh-huh.
And he'd be like, so you're coming up or what? And he'd be like, you don't know how to put your seatbelt on? and one of the one crew chief who told me about it, he came in and he was like, I said, son, you don't know how a seatbelt works? And I was like, you just told a freaking lieutenant colonel you don't know how a seatbelt works, and you called him son when you did it? Like, are you serious? Like, this is my first shot into the fray of rank doesn't matter.
Oh my God.
But yeah, it was such a wild time. That was a crazy trip.
Wow.
I definitely saw way too far past the curtain than I should have. And then, a year later, we went to Iraq and kind of did the same thing. Started out in Kuwait. Some of us drove up to Iraq. Some of us flew up to Iraq. And we opened Talil Air Base in Iraq, which later became Camp Adder. When I went back in 2009, it was Camp Adder.
I'm going to now pull up a map, and I'd love to, let's see here. There
It's
must be.
near Al-Nasiriyah.
Okay. Let's go to the Middle East here. Middle East map. I want to see the route, let's say the land navigation into Iraq. Let me see if I could zoom in. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, try to zoom in. Okay. So this is
That little dot, that's Kuwait.
Yeah, that's Kuwait. Very, very small.
Yep.
And some of you guys, you were at the border.
Well,
right?
No, we were actually near Kuwait City.
Oh.
So we weren't really that far from, it was a distance to the border.
Okay,
absolutely.
yeah. Kuwait City is right here.
Yep.
Some of you guys, like, you used your vehicles to enter into the border to Iraq.
Yep.
But where were you, like, stationed? Because Baghdad is right in the middle of Iraq.
So
right
way
here.
further south, right on right along the Euphrates is where Nasiriyah is in the south.
Okay, like you're around here?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, kind of in the, like, not quite in the Shia area.
Oh.
Because you know how people think of the Shia area as that kind of like close to the Iranian border side of the river?
Right.
And that's true, but like you could see it. Yeah.
So let me take us back to the first deployment to Iraq. So the invasion, I forgot when the invasion started. Like it's 2003, but like beginning, was it, or late 2000? No,
it was
March.
Beginning.
March. I think March. Yeah. So you guys were called up at what time of the year during that time?
So we knew. So this trip to Kuwait was a rotational thing.
Yeah.
Right. So it was a commitment that was pushed down to our fighter group that we had accepted. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it just happened to be that other things were happening during our Southern Watch deployment. Right.
Yeah.
And so we go back for Southern Watch, at least as far as we know it's Southern Watch.
Right.
We did hear that there was something supposed to happen about Iraq, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was going to take 10 months.
Wow.
So the plan was our sister squadron, even though it wasn't their turn, was supposed to go first, which was bullshit. So the 75th goes first. They got to Talil before we did.
Yeah.
And they kind of They pulled some shady shit, some shady 75th shit, as they always did. They sent some so a lot of parts on airplanes are redeemable, right? Where they go back to the depot and they get repaired and sent back out to the fleet. And then there's a financial component that's associated to that. Yeah. So kind of imagine an engine core charge, right? So if you buy an engine from someone and they give you what's called a core charge. And so you bring back the old engine and then they get the opportunity to recycle it. Right. And then they give you back the core charge. That exists in the military logistical system. Okay. Right? Yeah. So your unit is charged financially against your maintenance budget for this item until the old one is returned.
Gotcha.
We get there, and there are two extremely outstanding bills, and also that bill racks a little bit every day.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's called due in from maintenance, or DIFM.
Okay.
And it's a clock. I mean, it's DIFM time, right? And so, an engine fan disc, which is the encasing around the fan blades around the engine, is missing, and a fuel and engine relay box is missing.
Really?
And so we tear the place apart looking for these parts. We can't find them. Turns out they're in the burn pit. Been in the burn pit for months. They're gone. What? And we had to figure out how to get that situation remedied. And that was a gift left upon us by the 75th.
It's a gift.
And they did a bunch of shady shit. They did so much shady shit.
Oh my God.
They did what's called a combat phase when they didn't fucking have to. So the aircraft, every 400 hours, it has to go into what's called a phase inspection. Right? So there's a clock that's in the aircraft that tracks those hours. Yeah. That's also basically how you manage the war, right? So your available aircraft are based on who needs to go into phase and when, right? Yeah. So these motherfuckers, I swear to God, they do a combat phase, which you can do in combat, right? But they weren't fucking in sustained combat. They didn't have to do this. They had a full complement of people. They could have done this, no problem. And they could have done a real phase, right? And so in phase, you change a lot of fasteners, you change a lot of filters, you do a lot of scheduled maintenance to keep the airframe afloat. Okay. A combat phase means they just open all the panels, make sure all the parts are still there, and then close all the panels and send it back out. They did this bullshit. So the same aircraft. So this is the only time we deployed where we didn't bring our own planes. Yeah. The aircraft stayed in station. People moved, airplanes stayed. Bad fucking idea. Because this is when we start to uncover all this shit that had gone down during the real war. That's what they had said. And so these bastards do all this shit. And I'm sure, I don't blame the individual technician. It was somebody in senior leadership who thought this was a great idea, right? And that's who's responsible for this. Not my brothers and sisters that I'm still friends with, I'm still tight with. I don't hold you guys responsible for it. You just followed orders, you did your job. Yeah. But whoever thought this was a great idea and whoever sold it as a great idea needs to be at least punched really hard. And so they do this. So we catch hell for this aircraft being fucking severely out of phase. So we had to do a full-on phase on this jet, and clearing the combat phases, I guess, it requires a bunch of other jobs. It didn't affect my job, but it affected, all of us from a certain point of view, right? Yeah. And the jet was down, and when you have 12, you have to make fly, and one's not flying. We steal a lot of parts from the jet that's down. Oh my God. You steal a lot of parts from the jet that's down. Wow. And so it had already gone through this combat phase. We ripped a bunch of shit out of it to keep the other jets flying. And so it was just such a major pain in the ass to get this jet back in the air. And I remember being physically scarred from this whole event. I was like, you guys fucking suck.
Man, that's okay. Well, here, let me just say, we did approximately an hour and a half. I can keep going for sure because there's more Yeah. I want to, like, there are two parts that I really want to explore.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I would say that I might just grab some water real quick.
Yeah.
But also, we've got two things I'd love to talk to you some more about. One is obviously 2011 Libya.
Yes.
That's a big, major
Yeah.
deal. And then prior to that, I'm sure you've had other experiences abroad before Libya.
Yeah. Well, not as many as you'd think.
Okay.
So from 03, we come back. 04, lots of training. They were on deck to. So for some reason, because we had gone like so many years in a row, the rotational cycle about sending the A-10 units out was like fractured in a way.
Right.
And so the way the Air Force repaired it was they basically gave our fighter group like a whole year and a half off, right? And in that year and a half, I retrained. I got the fuck out of avionics, and I became a satellite communicator.
Really?
So that process started in 04 and finished in 05. Because I remember telling, like, my leadership in my unit, I'm not going to be here anymore summer of 05. So you need to start making plans and training people and doing things differently. Because they were like, well, you're going to be here. I'm like, no, I'm fucking not. and because I was a first-term airman, they can't take away your opportunity to retrain.
Yeah.
They have to give you one more shot at the Air Force in a different job before you reenlist, right? Or before you decide to reenlist. And that's what I had done, because I knew that, even though I enjoyed the job satisfaction of aircraft maintenance, it took its toll on my body physically a lot, and on my brain, and on my, cardiovascular shit runs in my family. And like, so living ramped up like that all the time, like I could see it damaging me. I could feel it damaging me. And I knew I needed a equally important and impactful job, but not such a high pace.
Was it also, you talk about like even carrying a lot of weights?
Yeah, carrying a lot of weight.
Oh, how much?
Like, so, I mean, it depends. Like, it depends on what piece of test equipment you need at what time.
Okay.
Right. We had an air data tester that weighed like 80 pounds, and you'd have to hump that thing from where you check tools out to the fucking ramp.
And how long of a distance would that be?
It depends. It varies.
Oh.
At home, it was really far.
Huh.
It was wild. Like, that piece of working in austere environments was always easier. Like, we always had like our supply dudes and our tool crib like right by where we worked.
Right. Okay.
But yet at home, it was like damn near half a mile away from the first airplane.
Oh my God.
So like at home it sucked, but yeah, like, even at Nellis, you just walk right out of the building and there's your fucking jets. And so
you had to carry a lot of that stuff.
So we had to hump all that shit back and forth, and like it was just a lot of work. And I want to say I was almost 27, 28, maybe 26-ish.
Yeah.
When I decided to retrain, because I had already had not quite 6 years in the military. So you can apply to retrain in your 59th month of your 6-year enlistment.
Yeah. And
so that's when I applied to retrain.
But that's one thing that when we talk about like carrying weights and stuff. I think that even with those people that train in special forces community,
right.
I mean, if you're in there for the long haul, your body at some point just can't take it,
Right. And it's usually when the adrenaline leaves, right?
Yeah.
When you get something that has a slower pace. For some dudes, that's when they separate, when they get out of the military. For me, it was when I got a slower paced job. Everything broke.
Oh.
That's when my back went to shit. My knee went to shit for the first time.
Yeah.
Here I am at not quite 30.
Right.
I have 8 years in service, and freaking my knee feels like it belongs to an 80-year-old.
Holy fuck. But in that case, when you start to realize that, and when that stuff becomes apparent, is there something that, do you get any sort of, during your service, any additional perks? Because like you've put your, just your life on the line, but your physical self.
Oh yeah. From a certain point of view, right? Like in my case, because I had retrained, I got an office job for like 2 years.
Oh.
But that's only because of like the luck of the draw, right? I went to a place that didn't have an at-home and garrison mission, so we didn't really do anything at home except for sit at our desks all day.
Right.
And and like I said, that's when everything appeared. And I'm assuming now knowing what I know now about my body, that's when the adrenaline had turned off. So for that almost 7 years of aircraft maintenance, the adrenaline had been high enough to where it would mask my injuries.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And so coming back down, it's like coming off of a drug.
Right.
Right. When you come back down off the adrenaline, like, oh shit, that hurts. Oh, I didn't know that hurt. My knee never popped like that before. What is that? And so I go and get checked out, and of course, they're like, oh, you have this problem with your knee and that problem with your knee, and my everything started, like the first thing that started to hurt were my knees, and then later it became my back, and then later it became my feet, and then later it became my shoulders, and later it became my hands.
Wow.
Which is why we are now where we are now.
That's rough. No, that's really rough. Let me ask you this about the I know there's also like I remember, and I saw it even on your backpack, the airborne sort of insignia.
That's a Special Forces patch.
Oh, Special Forces.
Yes.
Right. Because I know
that's a Special Forces group patch.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I know that even because I thought it was airborne, because I thought even those people that jump out of planes with carrying all that shit, that can be very.
So we would hear about crazy shit that happened at Bragg. So the 82nd Airborne is at Fort Bragg. Like everybody kind of knows that, right? Like they almost go synonymous, right? You say the 82nd, people think Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Yeah.
They had on their headquarters building a sign that was a counter that said if they went 82 days, they got a day off without a fatality. In my time from 99 to 05, they never got a day off.
Holy shit.
And that's an at-home, in-garrison fatality. That's not a combat fatality. Because the 82nd relieved 10th Mountain in Afghanistan. So they took over the big mission after 10th Mountain came home. So yeah, it's wild.
Wow.
So, and like I heard that when I got, so long story short, I was stationed there twice.
Yeah.
Neither time on purpose. I never asked to go there at all.
Yeah.
And the second time I got there in 2013, I had heard that there was an incident where someone had survived their parachute not opening.
Fuck.
And they just found like this like pile of goo on the ground, and this dude like died right there on the ground. But it's just crazy.
Yeah.
It is a dangerous business. Like I told you before we came on mic, I was told from the minute I entered into the aircraft maintenance complex that the jet can kill me if I'm not respectful and smart.
Right.
I told you about, there was million years ago, there was a guy who worked over an ejection seat on F4. The seat went off while he was working in the cockpit.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of people hit their head on the airplane. A lot of people I hit my head on the airplane.
God.
I saw a lot of people. That's pretty much it. We call it a hog bite. You got bit by the airplane. So the guy, the E7 in charge of us is called the production superintendent, or the pro super.
Okay.
He was an instructor for a really long time in the training pipeline.
Yeah.
But in his last airplane he had worked on were F4s. So F4s sit super low, right? A10s sit high.
Yeah.
Right? So you can load all the bombs on it and all that shit, right?
Exactly.
And so he was not used to working on an airframe that was so high up. Well, he was out there doing what's called the ER. It's the exceptional release of the airframe. So that you basically like bless the aircraft as it's good for the pilots to come fly it, right? It's a very holy experience. Yeah. They usually do it by themselves. They didn't need anybody out there. Or if they had any questions about maintenance that had been performed or whatever, they would look through the documents and be like, hey, can you come talk to me about this or that? How did you fix this and why is it good, right? Those kind of conversations. Well, this dude was pretty cool about that kind of stuff. He didn't really ask those kind of questions. Well, he fucking hits his head on the aircraft while he's out there by himself.
Wow.
Right? He's like the only dude out on the ramp. This is on the O2 trip.
Okay.
Right? And we hear over the radio, "Could somebody come help?" And that's not normal radio. We all haul ass out there, and he's like fucking like on his back with the radio like kind of like on his chest, like trying to call for help. And like just blood is just like out of his head.
Oh my God.
Not like arterial, but definitely like oozing out. Because a head wound just goes, man. It just fucking, you just bleed bad.
Yep.
And he's like fucking, ugh. We get him out of there, and he's fine. He's at work the next day.
Okay.
But somebody fucking drew a chalk outline on the ground where he was.
That's hilarious.
And wrote, I forgot his last name. They wrote Sergeant so-and-so 0, and they put the aircraft tail number on the ground 1.
Oh my goodness. Those guys are hilarious.
So yeah, it's a dangerous industry, right? And there's no mistake made about it. You know, I sat on a live ejection seat for an hour and a half one time. You know, I think I told you that because I was pissed off at the pilot. I tried to talk the pilot out of what he claimed was wrong, which it still wasn't wrong, and I'll stick to that today. And instead, he wrote it up, right? So he gets out of the seat. I get in. The crew chief had not had a chance to safe the seat, or safe the rest of the cockpit because the cockpit wasn't safed at all.
Oh God!
So that means there's no anti-ejection pins in the seat. There's no anti-ejection for the canopy.
Okay.
Like none of the shit.
Right.
Like it's all live, right?
God.
So I sat on this shit for an hour and a half doing a calibration. And I look at the caution panels like over here to my right. And you're supposed to look for seat not armed.
Yeah.
And I noticed that light's not on. And I'm like, shit. And so I get up. And I do what we used to call the QA look around. So we would look for quality assurance.
Okay.
You could always spot the QA guys because they had brand new trucks and we had old crappy trucks. So because they had fighter group money, we were just a poor fighter squadron.
Oh my.
So I'd pop up and I looked around the aircraft and I didn't see their trucks, and I just reached over. So the pins are kept on the left side of the aircraft in a like a container.
Yeah.
Right. And I reach in there, I pull the pins out, I slap them in under my ass so nobody's looking. I throw the other 2 pins in, and I throw the canopy ejection pin in. Nobody's any of the wiser. But my ass was all sorts of puckered up after the fact. It was like, man, I just sat on top of an explosive for a really long time.
Holy shit.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that like it kind of like coming down off of the adrenaline, right? It's like, oh my God, I could have just blown myself to bits because I was mad at this pilot. and that was a big lesson for me to not be so fiery.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, you kind of know me. I'm a little bit of a fiery dude. I was much worse in my 20s.
Oh, man. No, I would imagine. No, back then, a lot of energy.
Yeah, a lot of energy. Very rarely sober. You know?
Oh my God. Well, let me take it to let's fast forward to 2011. That's when you've got the Arab Spring.
Yes.
And I'm sure that sent a lot of obviously shockwaves across the region. Even the ones that are operating in the region at the time might have thought that they might be going to battle at some point.
Right.
In one place or the other. And obviously Syria is one of the main
touch points. Yeah.
Yep. That's a big.
Well, in your hometown,
near what?
Your home country of Libya is a big touch point in this aspect too.
Oh, absolutely. And I remember even talking to one of my. I mentioned him before. My ex's brother. He was deployed to Syria. I think they had, because I know that they had a pretty substantial number of special forces guys over there during the fight against ISIS, I think.
Yeah.
But I think his
a little pre-ISIS-y, but
pre-ISIS, yeah.
Or like young ISIS, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think his deployment, was in 2019, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, then definitely that was for real ISIS then in 19.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But
or what's left of ISIS.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's probably a more accurate assessment.
Yeah. And I remember even at some point here they brought in the a former ambassador, retired ambassador, who was in Syria in 2019, and he mentioned that he was one of 2 American civilians in Syria at the time. And his boss was, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the name, but his boss was James Jeffrey.
Mm-hmm.
He was like the special envoy to the fight against ISIS.
You know, say.
That name doesn't ring a bell.
No.
Yeah. Well, I had him. That was his boss, and I actually had him on the podcast before, like a few years back. But anyways, what I'm trying to get at is, 2011. That's a big deal, huge shift in the entire Middle Eastern /
Right.
North Africa landscape.
Absolutely.
And you were part of that. One of the, I guess, you were operating in one of the coordination, perhaps, right, with NATO forces,
right,
in Libya.
So
yeah.
how Libya touched me was, so at the time I was assigned to Admiral Stavridis' communications team at the Supreme Headquarters of the Allied Powers Europe, or SHAPE, in Mons, Belgium. Yeah. Admiral Stavridis is still kind of around. He's on MSNBC pretty regularly. If you watch Morning Joe, he's on there. He's the guy who talks about international politics a lot. He was the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, or the SAC-EUR, right? A position that goes back to World War II. The first SAC-EUR was Eisenhower.
Seriously?
Yes.
Wow.
The building was named after him. Or we had a conference room named after him. But like his bust was everywhere and all that kind of stuff. And the first SHAPE, the first Supreme Headquarters of the Allied Powers was in Paris.
Oh.
But Paris dipped out of NATO in like the 50s, and they booted everybody out. So then Belgium's like, okay, we'll come here. And so that's what built that place that I worked at. Right. And so on the communications team, we were responsible for funneling classified information to the SAC-EUR at the time. So everything above secret came through us. Right. And I'm not going to touch into anything that's bad.
Yeah.
But we had to route all this info to him. And a lot of it is decision-making stuff, right? So-and-so needs a decision about X. So-and-so needs a decision about X. Same thing with phone calls. We routed all of his phone calls to him, all that kind of stuff, right? So when Libya jumps off, or was it Operation New Dawn, OND, I think it was called, something like that.
Can't tell you for sure. I
have to look it up.
Yeah.
Or Odyssey Dawn. Operation Odyssey Dawn. OOD.
Okay.
Yeah. When that happened, so we had company assets, CIA people that were in a skiff inside of our skiff.
Okay.
Right? They come out and they're like, we need to talk to the Admiral, like right now. And we didn't answer any questions. We didn't pry. It turns out that they knew probably that shit was going to jump off in Libya before shit jumped off in Libya. And so they get him on the horn. Libya began with an air campaign.
Yeah.
Right. We all kind of are aware that most of that was an air campaign.
Yeah.
A NATO driven and coordinated air campaign.
Yep.
Right. So we basically start to run the war with 4 people at a desk not too unsimilar at the one that you're at, and a big ass phone.
Wow.
So we had, imagine that your desktop that you're sitting next to, with 6 other monitors, 1 top secret, 1 NATO secret, 1 U.S. secret, 1 U.S. on class.
Holy shit.
That's how we ran the first 14 hours of the war.
Only 4 of you guys.
Because it was a no foreign event at first. It was not fully NATO at first. It was U.S. Our NATO brothers couldn't be pulled into this.
Oh, okay.
And what was wild, Abdullah, is there's a beautiful, fully functional operations center above us. It was amazing. Right? But here we are, funneling a fire hose worth of info to the boss about Libya with just the 4 of us. And they have 50 dudes that work upstairs, but they're NATO, they're foreign. They can't see what we're seeing. Right? And so it was super shitty. And so like we're just like sending him report after report after report after report after report. We're like, nobody's sleeping. Nobody's like, it is just fucking just go, right?
Man.
And phone call after phone call, phone calls from DC, phone calls from Europe, phone calls from Africa, phone calls from everywhere, right?
God.
And we're pushing all this info to him. Every time we get him on the phone, he's like, we've got to get this in someone else's hands.
He himself is tired.
He's like, God, we've got to get this in somebody else's hands.
Oh, my God.
And after that 12 hours-ish or 14 hours-ish, right, then it goes into the NATO commander they ended up picking. I think it was a guy from the UK they ended up picking, or an Italian guy. I have to go back and look. Because NATO is very convoluted. It's very, like, slow-moving, I guess is the right word.
Oh, yeah.
I'm in international studies here. I'm in international studies 3 here, and I told the kids there about a story about like kind of how to picture the NATO alliance. When we first got there in 10, a volcano in Italy, I believe, had gone off and spread ash all across Europe and grounded flights all across Europe. You might have been a little kid.
Yeah, I was 4. No, wait, not 4, 10.
So yeah, it wasn't really on your radar.
Yeah.
Right. But it had grounded so many flights, and there were people who needed help who were directly affected by the volcano. So I'm new. A bunch of us are new, right? A bunch of us are new.
Okay.
Even the deputy commander underneath our SACUR, right? So it's him and a 1-star, and then a Navy 06. So they're like the big 3 of the command, right? The 1-star is an Air Force guy, right? Super nice dude, wicked smart. He starts to spin up to try to figure out how to get airlift to the affected area with supplies, right?
Yeah.
A typical kind of I think he was a C-130 pilot, so a typical bid jet kind of dude move, right? We're going to try to get shit to these people and try to help them as fast as we can. But we can't just do that because we're NATO.
Oh.
So, and this is a NATO country. So we ask the NATO Situation Center, which is in Brussels.
Yeah.
Hey, so this is what's going to happen. So what do we need to do to make this happen? And they're like, well, the number one phrase you hear in Belgium when you first get there is it's not possible. Right? Or normally. So this happens to my 1-star over the phone from the NATO Situation Center. Normally, you're correct. It is easy to get the airplane there with this stuff. Right? But in this case, we cannot fly. And he starts giving him like a kind of a report of what the lay of the land. And he was like, and the guy who he talked to was like a sergeant from the fucking Belgian military. Oh. And he's like, are you new to NATO, sir? And he was like, yeah, I just got here. And he's like, you will see this moves at the speed of the alliance. The speed of the alliance was like the phrase I paid the rest of my time I was there. So it takes weeks to get humanitarian aid to these people. Weeks.
And that's an ally, for God's sake.
An ally. Yeah. A neighboring ally in the same continent.
Exactly.
Like hundreds of miles away, not thousands.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, my God.
So we end up getting aid to these people to help. Fast forward about a year. On base, so the NATO alliance, the national military representatives on base kind of dictate all the legal policy on the base, right? They all kind of have a vote. It's so fucking crazy. The school that's on base is an international school, right? So it has people from everybody, all the families who work at the headquarters, right? And Americans. So there's like a French school, a German school, and an American school, yada, 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 right? Yeah. So they're all kind of together in this big international school thing. Okay. They don't really mix fully. They do mix like at lunch. They mix it like certain events, but the American school does American school things, and the other different schools do their things, right? So right next to the school is the bowling alley. The bowling alley serves alcohol.
Nice.
See where this is going. The American kids could drink on base of 16.
Why though?
Because it's Europe.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
So American kids are going and getting shit wrecked at the bowling alley at lunch and like basically coming back and like fighting their teachers, throwing up in the hallways, like all the bad frat party things that can happen from somebody who is inexperienced with drinking.
Right.
Right. It's hilarious. I thought it was awesome.
God.
And again, I've always been kind of a rebel, so like I think this shit's hilarious. A little bit of chaos to all these assholes is great.
Yeah.
And so this goes down. No shit. I swear to God. Like 48 hours later, drinking age on base is 21.
Holy shit. That switch just happens like instantly.
So the speed of the alliance, right? When it's right here in your backyard, you move really fast. But when it's in Italy or Greece,
it's not possible.
Not possible.
Oh, dude.
I thought that was hilarious. I was like,
God.
oh, when it came to blankets and food for people who had been displaced by this volcano, no. But damn it, you had better not be drinking at the bowling alley.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
Oh, and of course, there's all sorts of like, you Americans ruined this. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, my. Well, that's just insane to me because, like, you would think that an ally would be, it's like that's like your family member.
Right.
You wouldn't want to delay that help in any way, shape, or form, right?
Nope.
You're like, we're coming to get
now.
You. Yeah.
We'll be there in an hour.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
that's what, like, when we talk about, a very close example, since, we brought up Libya in 2012 when, the Al-Qaeda attacks the annex and kills the ambassador. There's been calls all over, Italy, France, you've got all these, different, or Germany, U.S. base. And I think it took maybe less than 24 hours to get there, right?
Right. We were in the decision-making tree on that too.
Oh, really?
Right.
Well, let's talk about that. What was
I mean, it really wasn't that big of, like, from our perspective, we didn't know what was really happening.
You didn't know it was happening.
We didn't know how bad the situation was. We knew that UCOM was spinning up, though.
Okay.
And that UCOM was pushing back to the States to try to get assets into Benghazi ASAP.
Ooh.
I do know, I mean, without giving away things that are dirty, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was things ready to happen that were postponed by DC.
Okay.
Or they drug their feet just long enough.
Mm.
But
That's
like you and I know, because we've seen 13 Hours, right?
Right.
There were Delta dudes there. They got Delta dudes there, right?
Post or during?
During.
They got?
Yeah, there were at least 2 Delta dudes there, at least according to the books that have been written about it. But
they got them in during
during the fight.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Well, that stuff didn't pop up in the movie.
Well, maybe it was at the end.
Yeah.
Maybe they got there at the end.
Because I remember it was...
Because there's usually some... not to give away tradecraft, right?
Okay.
There's usually somebody at the embassy who can help.
Well, they did have...
Or at a neighboring embassy that can help.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like the incident in Mali.
Yeah.
I don't remember what year it is. That guy was on Sean Ryan, the guy who talks about the incident in Mali.
Delta Force guy?
Delta Force guy.
Yeah, he was
at the embassy to train embassy folks to do, like, counterterrorism type events.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And he just happened to be there at the right time, right place.
Yep. I think he's the guy with the looks like Uncle Fester, when he talked about Saddam.
Yes. No, it's the other dude.
The other dude?
He's much younger.
Much younger.
Yeah.
Good Lord. Okay. 'Cause I remember it was, 'cause there's that blonde guy with shoulder length hair.
Yes. I forgot the guy's name. We'd have to look it up.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I could search Delta Mali. But yeah, so there's usually in place, and I know that the plan in Benghazi was to create a new embassy, right?
Yep.
And when things are in their fledgling stages, like who's going to do what and where is not always fully worked out. Yeah. And that definitely reads to that situation. Because those folks at the CIA annex, they weren't there for the embassy.
Right. They were there to stop.
They had their own mission.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, weapons proliferation and shit
right.
like
They were trying to keep things chill after Gaddafi.
Yeah.
As best they could.
Yeah.
Right. But I think that let me see, Molly Delta Force.
Yeah.
Molly Delta Force dude. Oh yeah, see, he got the Silver Cross for that mission.
Wait, can I see the image of that guy?
Yeah, let me see if it will show his image.
Because I got.
They
I
don't
definitely
show
have
his,
to go
they
back.
don't say his name in this one.
Really? Because then I'd have to go back to the episode and really watch it and see the.
But the point that we're making with this though is that forces that are capable to help in said situation are not really normally far away.
Yeah.
Right. They had, they show it in the movie. They did get reinforced by their own guys. There were GRS dudes that came and helped them.
Yep.
And so there were people there that could get there that could have come help. This is not unclassified, or this is unclassified, but the 82nd maintains what's called the Global Response Force, the GRF.
Okay.
At one point, one of their brigade combat teams is always in the GRF, right? So they rotate in and out of it, right? It's like an alert cycle. And the GRF is meant to go anywhere in the world in 72 hours.
In 72 hours. Okay.
So that's why there's still big airplanes at Bragg to move those dudes in 72 hours. And they have some sort of agreement that keeps those airframes there. So there were things that could have been done differently.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like when we push back against former Secretary Clinton and the Obama administration, there were things that could have been done differently. Granted, I mean, it's not going to bring these people back. It's not going to change what happened. What happened to Chris Stevens was a horribly sad event, and it's sad to see anybody die like that, let alone a U.S. ambassador, right, who really did have love for the Libyan people, and really did want to see them step out on their own in a glorious independence that they were on deck to receive.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And it always seems like it's that person who's like that shining light that the evil comes and extinguishes.
Yeah. When we're gonna wrap it up real soon, but I did want to give a little bit of maybe give a little bit of attention to maybe post-military service. Just two quick things, and then we can wrap it up. So you, when did you retire? What year was that, and how did it happen?
In 2020, I retired.
2020.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
It was wild.
Ugh.
So you have to forecast your retirement a year out. So I clicked the button in 19. And when I decided to retire in June of 2020, the plan was, because so I did make it to E6.
Okay.
I know I was in E5 for like 12 years.
Oh, nice.
But I made it to E6, and I had one more shot at E7. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, knowing what I know now, I probably wouldn't have stayed anyway if I made it. Right.
Really?
But results dropped in June. My retirement date was 1 July. So I was going to give it that one more shot to make Master Sergeant, and then I didn't.
Okay.
But, however, because it's COVID and the world got turned on its head.
Yeah.
COVID during the Trump administration as well.
Right.
Right. So there was a lot of bullshit with releasing these E7 results. So I found out, like, after I'd already collected my first retirement check, that I made it.
Seriously?
Yeah, I get a rando call from a friend of mine who worked at Air Force Personnel Command. He's like, "Bro, you made it! Oh my God!" And I was like, "That's great. I just collected my first retirement check."
Oh my God!
And he's like, "You're retired?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, I'm looking at your shit. It doesn't say you're retired." I'm like, "Dude, I'm fucking retired." and I was like, "Welcome to COVID military, right? Everything's messed up." And I actually leaned on him because my pay had gotten all sorts of messed up when I left. So they normally hold your last paycheck to just make sure you don't owe the government anything. Not a lot of people know this. They held my last paycheck to make sure I didn't owe the government anything. I didn't owe the government anything, thank God.
Good.
However, but my last paycheck got withheld because at Nellis, because I retired from Vegas. That was my last assignment. Was in the Vegas area, if you will. But the personnel shop that was in charge of us was at Nellis.
Okay.
They sat on it, and they never turned on my terminal leave because I went on leave before I left. So you go on what's called terminal leave. You burn off the rest of your vacation time. And I had like 4 weeks and some change of it that I'd burned off.
Yeah. And
they never turned it on. So the system is showing that they have to pay me for my leave, even though I took it. So basically the financial system short-circuited over this money, and the only people who could answer these questions were in Nellis.
Right.
And so they basically sat on it long enough to where it became a problem. I was unaware of this. So I get paid for my retirement. So that got processed. I get paid for my retirement, and I get my first disability check before I got my final paycheck from the military.
Seriously.
I was pissed.
Wow.
I was so mad.
That's so messed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, at the end of the day, nobody owed anybody anything.
They just sat on it.
They just sat on it.
Yeah. That's rough.
That's stupid. But yeah, everything that could go wrong, like retiring and out processing during COVID, did go wrong.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
But that was 2020. Then when you left, did you have like I'm sure there's a lot of nostalgia right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's also like, you're like, I'm going to start maybe a new chapter or something new. What was on your radar at the time?
Well, when I got my disability rating and when I got my retirement, I was like, well, fuck, do I need to work? What do I need to do? Because I got a slight raise to be retired.
Okay.
Like, not a lot, but a little bit, right? Like $30-ish, plus or minus, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, shit, I'm making more retired than I did on active duty. Like, do I really need to fucking work anymore? And then, so I was like a house husband for a little while. I got custody of my oldest. He came to live with me.
Okay.
My oldest son, Jacob.
Yeah. And
he was still a minor. I mean, I had custody, so obviously, right? But he came to live with me, and the schools are shut down. He's doing Zoom school every day, and he hated it. It was like killing his soul.
Yeah,
and
I can imagine.
And I'm sure a bunch of kids out there know exactly how that felt.
Yeah.
And of course, I try to be Mr. Good dad. Like, you better participate. Turn your camera on. And little did I know, it didn't matter at all.
Oh, it did. Honestly,
it really did not.
Yeah.
Would have been nice to know.
Yeah.
And he was like, nobody has their camera on. I was like, all right, fine, fuck it. And so,
yeah, sometimes I wake up like a minute before class and I tune in. And I'm here.
He would be there. He would be there with his blanket over his head, like asleep against the monitor, listening to his first period.
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh my God. Poor kid.
It's really sad. It's.
But for them though, they only did it that one semester. So he went back like the early part of 21. So he went back to school pretty fast.
Yeah.
And so when he went back to school, I was like, well, shit, what am I going to do? And, I had this like sense of duty to try to help build the economy in Apex, right? We're going to bounce back for the pandemic, and I used to go to the yoga studio that's over by the theater in Apex.
Okay.
Right. The Regal Theater.
Yeah.
And I drove past it every time I would leave yoga. And the reason why I did yoga and still do is because so much shit in my body's broken, right?
Yep.
Lifting weights is not really in the cards. So I swim a lot. I do a lot of yoga.
Nice.
And so I was on my way back and I saw like activity at the theater. And I was like, what the fuck is that? So I go over there and I go and talk to one of the guys who ended up working for me later is there. And I was like, hey, are you guys reopening? What's happening? When is this happening? And he's like, yeah, we're reopening pretty soon. I was like, are you guys looking for positions? What do you got going on? And he's like, yeah, they are hiring. And he like showed me the website on my phone. So I applied like almost right away because I wanted a fun job.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm not here for money per se.
Yeah.
You know, a little extra money is nice. I'm not going to say no to extra money. But I wanted something that would be fun. Like, and I always loved going to the movies. I was a big movie kid. Still am.
Yeah.
And so I get hired on as the senior team lead. So I already get like a way more higher position than I wanted.
Nice.
Because I didn't want to be in charge of anybody anymore. Like a lot of GIs will tell you, you know, you get tired of getting your ass chewed for something somebody else did. And you just kind of like want to be in charge of yourself for a little while.
Right.
Obviously that didn't happen for me. So I have like 30 new subordinates.
32.
And a bunch of them. So I trade the 19-year-olds who used to work for me in the military for 17 and 18-year-olds at the theater. And I'm like, oh, well, here we go. And so it was fine. Like that part wasn't that bad. They called me the Regal Dad.
Nice.
You know, and I was really good to those kids. I like to think we had a really good relationship. We had a really good crew. Yeah. I had a boss who was younger than me. Everybody was younger than me, and I was kind of used to that. Like my last unit in the military, the only person who was older than me was my commander.
Wow.
So, so I had already come to like to terms with that. I'm probably going to be the old guy in the room, right? I'm okay with that. Yeah. And so, I'd gotten past that, and it was a good experience until you have technology experience.
Technology.
Can you fix our 40X theater? Sure. Oh, can you fix our computers? Sure. Can you fix our registers?
I see where it is.
Sure. Can you run this cable from here to here? Can you go work on that camera? Can you go? And there's no consideration of additional compensation here. And I was working really, really hard. And again, hurting my body again. That was the other part. I could feel the pain. Yeah. And I could feel things hurting again. Mm-hmm. And again, like, because I have no off switch per se, right? Like I have a throttle. It either goes all the way up or all the way down, right? And so I felt that throttle going all the way up again. Yeah. Right? To where the adrenaline is taking the pain away and I can just fucking knock out shit. And it was nice to do that. And I do feel like, you know, as a good citizen, I did my part to help rebuild Apex's economy. Mm. But at the same time, and you know, full disclosure, I live in Apex now. Yeah. You know, it just became a kind of a shitty job. Mm. You know, I used to tell people working there, it's like going back to work for the Department of Defense. Mm. We have more problems than money. We all have uniforms we hate. And every time when somebody from the outside comes to talk to us, they tell us we suck. It was just, and that's how it was. Whenever we got inspected by corporate, they always, first thing out of their mouth, God, you guys suck so bad. You know what I mean? Like in like flashlight inspections to search for dust. What? Oh yeah. Fucking crazy. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? Enough's enough. Mm. And so in 23, because the economy sucked. Yeah. We're talking about post-COVID rebuild, right? The economy sucked. There is baked into Department of Defense raises that when the economy dips to a certain point, we all automatically get a bump to help deal with the new cost of living. Yeah. Because you really, like, it goes back to the 60s where they didn't want, you know, like homeless active duty people. Yep. Right? That makes us look really shitty. Yeah. And so I get this massive cost of living raise. I mean, not massive, but enough to where it negated the Regal money, right? And so I was like, well, the Regal money's gone, so do I really need to be here anymore? And the company declared bankruptcy in October of 23 or 22.
Really? But they're still open now.
Not anymore.
Not anymore?
No, they got sold, yeah.
I didn't get, well, I went to the Regal Cinema like a few weeks back. Maybe this is a different.
It might be a different one. Yeah. Because there's one in Cary, too.
Oh, probably that's the one I went to.
That one's surviving.
Okay.
Ish.
I watched Joker too.
Nice.
It sucked.
Yeah, I heard it sucked. I heard it sucked. I watched this one. It was horrible.
Yeah, fucking paid money to watch.
Can't believe I paid real American dollars for this trash.
Could have like torrented it. I'm
Right.
just kidding.
either way.
Yeah.
I mean, fuck, it hit streaming like 5 minutes after it was in the theater.
Yeah.
So I realized I didn't need to be there anymore. I felt like I did what I needed to do there. And I was like, well, maybe I'll go back to school.
Yeah.
And I started looking to see, because I at the same time I retired, a bunch of the soft people I retired with, the special operations folks, were retiring at the same time. And I kind of was like watching to like what their like career paths were post-military. And I was like, okay. And then I started asking, okay, well, what's your degree in? What's this? What's that? Right? Or what degree do you recommend one pursues? Right? Because I was not a SEAL. I was not a long tab or SF guy. The concept of walking into one of those jobs post-retirement wasn't, I have to supplement that with education. Right. And like a lot of education, like to the point where a doctor needs to be in front of my name to be taken seriously in those spaces. And so I was like, well, I could go back to school and I could probably get my doctorate if I really wanted to.
Yeah.
And so that's what started this whole international studies pathway. And I applied at state first before I decided to go anywhere. State was like, yeah, go fuck yourself. You have no school. Like, I don't even think my little wolf paw account made it very far.
Oh my God. That's hard.
And so I was like, oh, okay. Wake Tech, I tried to apply at Wake Tech. Wake Tech says, well, you don't have enough time in North Carolina.
Seriously?
For in-state tuition. GI Bill, no, not outside. No, they will not pay not outside of state or out-of-state tuition.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, shit. So I have to wait. And I did do that, but like before I started working at the theater. This happened before I started working at the theater.
Okay.
And so I'd burned enough time at the theater to meet the time in state requirements.
Right.
Mind you, I had 14 non-consecutive years in this state before I even asked to go to touch their education system. They're like, we don't care. How long have you owned property in this state? Oh, okay. So I met the requirement. I got my in-state tuition at Wake Tech. I went to Wake Tech for a year and a half ish, and I graduated. And there's agreements between Wake Tech and state. They're extremely helpful towards transfer students. So if anybody is out there that has benefited from this, or I know someone who could benefit from this, your acceptance rate from Wake Tech to here is like 90%.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty much like that for all the in-state schools.
Nice.
They have like all these agreements where their graduates get first look and yada, 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 right? So, and I get picked up to come here. Because I'm a psycho and I took classes during the summer, like I told you, like on the way here, I've been in school physically for, at the end of this semester, 24 calendar months.
Yep.
I am finishing my second semester of my junior year right now.
Wow.
So I'm way ahead.
Yeah.
Not necessarily by design. It just happened that way.
Yeah.
But I wanted to keep the GI Bill money rolling through the summer. So you have to meet certain requirements to keep the GI Bill money rolling through the summer. And that's what I did. So I took 5 classes this summer here. God. I'm in 5 classes now, which sucks.
Yeah.
And I make no mistake, I know I am in class with people who are in 6 classes and 7 classes.
Yeah.
I know people who are taking a lot of classes at the same time.
Yeah.
But I'm 47. You're not.
That makes a big difference.
I have 2 children. I have a house. I had 2 dogs. I don't have dogs anymore. But a lot has happened since we moved here. So
makes a huge difference.
And I'm highly politically active. I worked my ass off during this last election. I worked my ass off in all the elections I've been back in North Carolina for.
Yeah.
So it's like, I have a lot going on. To be stupid enough to take on 5 classes this semester was dumb. But with that, though, I have the opportunity to slow down a little bit, and I'm definitely going to slow down. I have a job. I work for Democracy North Carolina. I'm the regional organizer for the Triangle.
Shout out to Democracy North Carolina.
Shout out to Democracy North Carolina. And thank you so much to Suhelema for hiring me. You're the best. Love you. And so I have a part-time job. I work here, and I go to school here. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to slow down a little bit. I'm only taking 4 classes next semester.
That's good.
Probably going to continue that out for the rest of my time here. Probably graduate. Well, now that I for sure have to go overseas for study abroad for my IS degree.
Oh, yeah.
Or they really, really want me, or I haven't won that fight yet. So we'll see what happens
Fingers
there.
crossed. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. But that will probably be the last thing I do here.
Yeah.
Will be the study abroad piece. So I'm going to milk it till the very end. And then I'll graduate with summer of 26.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say, Jason, I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, brother.
We've been talking we've been talking even before we started recording.
I know. I love it, dude. I love it. You are an outstanding conversationalist.
I appreciate that.
I knew the minute I met you when you came and spoke to our class. Again, full disclosure, Abdullah came and talked to us about Libya in my Arab pop culture class with Dr. Saylor.
Yeah,
Elizabeth
shout
Saylor.
out to her as well.
Shout out to Elizabeth Saylor. You're amazing. And a keystone to my success here at NC State. But I met, and I'm like, oh, Libya's in the house. That's how I started our conversation.
Libya's
and I was
here.
I know a couple things about Libya, and you're like, oh, really? And I told you how Libya touched me, and Operation Odyssey Dawn touched me. And you're like, oh my God, I was just a little kid. and again, not the first or last time I'm ever going to hear that. You know what I mean?
Right.
We talk about 9/11 came around this year, and we talked about where were you, what were you doing at 9/11? None of the kids in the room have anything to say. I'll be like, well, let me tell you. My mom told me that, that a plane had crashed into
Yeah, no, some of them might not even been born during that year.
Absolutely.
3 years after that happened, they were born.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but no, it's honestly an honor to have you here and to have this conversation. We talked about a lot, but I reckon there's a lot more to talk about. So
there's always room for a round 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't even touch on any of the cool guy stuff. And we can talk about that later.
For sure. No, for sure. But yeah, thank you everybody for tuning in. This is, I think, arguably the longest I've recorded on the podcast. So yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely.